What is going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Jimmy Grande, also known as James Grande, and this is another edition of Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. Grande, they kept us apart for about 6 months there, ever since I jokingly told you on a night where half the Houston Rockets were out, or you're not going with James Harden. We have not been on a stream since, my man. How the hell are you?
I'm good, man, but Fancy, 6 months, 2 years, 6 years, they can't keep us apart forever. So I'm happy to be back alongside of you on this glorious stream, on this glorious Wednesday afternoon, and I'm ready to rock.
Yeah, man, and with that, by the way, I'm just letting you know, I know you're in your Raz Bowl. I know you've been talking a little smack to my co-host, Adam Ronis, and dude, I just want to say about that, good job, man. Always talk smack to Adam Ronis.
Always. I've been giving him a lot of crap. I'm happy that he's brought it up. And I keep saying that he's holding the draft up, but I will say his selection time has actually been a little faster than mine, due to a timeout. Partly, obviously, my fault because I timed out, but he has been picking pretty quick. And in typical Ronis fashion, he has Allen Robinson. He has all the guys that he's talked about all offseason. So he's had an okay draft, but I won't go further than okay.
Oh, just okay. Just okay. Give him a grade of a C. Grande, draft grades. Ugh, bad taste in my mouth. I hate draft grades. Let's just move on then, Grande. Let's talk a little fantasy football. We're going to talk a little NBA as well, because when Grande and I get together, it's a big old NBA party. John and Pemba also hanging with us, producing the program. We thank Johnny M for that. James, let's talk about some ADPs right now that we like and don't like, because whenever I hear a hip-hop song from the mid-2000s, late 2000s, even early 2010s, I think of you, James Grande. I just do, because I know that you'll always know the song. If I go to Ronis with Jadakiss, 50% chance he knows the song. If it's Big L, he'll know everything. Big Pun, he'll know everything. But with you, I can go and say, hey, man, remember this song? I send you the link. And that gave me an idea. Based off the song by Jadakiss, Who's Real, we figured we could do a Who's Real, Who's Not. He's phony, she's fake. That's the type of people we hate, Grande.
That's the type of ADP we hate or like.
That's right, or like, for that matter. Grande, then let's start by talking about some of the players, and we don't have to be too specific. We can just see, we've been in a number of drafts already, whether they're mock, whether they're auctions, whether you take Jack Doyle when I'm about to spend $1 on him and you raise him up to 3 or 4 and totally screw me in the Fantasy Alarm mock auction that we had, or I'm sorry, best ball auction that we had. So, Grande, at this point, who is one of the realest players in the room when it comes to average draft positions? You get the ball rolling, and then we'll continue the fire.
So someone I've actually grown fond of, and this is very recent, due to a lot of opt-outs, and it's not someone I actually was fond of coming into, like, probably today. And all morning I've been looking at a little Devontae Parker, and some people might think I'm crazy because, who's going to play? I mean, we know Fitzpatrick. He's already came out and said, I'm basically the torch holder. I'm going to play until Tua's ready to play, and I'm going to be happy to, coach him up and help him with whatever he needs. I think everyone thinks Tua is going to be the real deal, which is why he was drafted so highly. But, I mean, Albert Wilson just opted out, and Allen Hurns. And they're not huge factors in Miami, but there are a couple of guys who have had decent seasons. Albert Wilson, I think for the last 3 years, has had a lot of fantasy hype. I saw as soon as Allen Hurns opted out, I saw people all over the Albert Wilson band train, all over Twitter, and the respectable fantasy analysts. So Devontae Parker is being drafted around wide receiver 25, 26, around Terry McLaurin. We can't forget, this was I think, if I'm not mistaken, wide receiver 1 for the second half of the year, or if he wasn't wide receiver 1 because Michael Thomas still existed, he was 2 or 3 or in the top 5. We're talking about a guy who has a great rapport with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I know Mike Gesicki is another guy people are high on, catching a lot of passes, but his other primary candidate at receiver is Preston Williams, who's also coming back from an injury.
Wow. Shades of my first fantasy baseball draft, Grande.
Right.
Now you're making me feel old as hell.
Not Preston Wilson. Preston Williams coming back from an injury. I mean, Devontae Parker could really thrive, especially with Fitzpatrick, and I think that carries over to Tua. I mean, we saw rookie quarterbacks have success with, wide receiver. I mean, Terry McLaurin last year with Haskins didn't really see a drop off from when Haskins became the quarterback. So I think Parker could really be in the driver's seat, and I'm starting to hop on the Devontae Parker bandwagon as his ADP kind of falls. I mean, if you go over to FantasyAlarm.com and you go over to our ADP tool, I mean, we're talking about a guy that was being drafted on Yahoo, or let's go month by month. In July, he was being drafted is 67. He's fallen 2 picks since July, which, doesn't seem like a lot, but hey, clearly trending downwards. I think Devontae Parker is someone that should be trending upwards and could end high wide receiver 2 by year's end.
Yes, and that's someone now that you have to give more consideration to. I mean, this guy has been the laughingstock of fantasy football up until last season, and now you're looking at the 128 targets he got, and with the opt-outs, Grande, that seems more than likely that those targets are going to be very, very close again. 9 touchdowns for him, over 1,200 yards receiving. This was a guy I wasn't looking at, not because he's on the Miami Dolphins. Grande, I want to get your take on this before we continue. Do you ever take certain teams and just go, I'm not going to draft anyone on this team? Because I have a philosophy that no stone goes unturned, and every team has some kind of value. Because if I'm sitting there in my final few rounds of my fantasy football draft, and all of a sudden you have, let's just say, Redskins options, or I'm sorry, the Washington football team options come up, then you know what? I'm either, if they're good for the first week or two, I'm going to be spending a decent amount of fab on them. If I start to see they're good after a few weeks, why not just grab them and hope that you just got yourself a lottery ticket that you can plug in from time to time and at least stash on your bench? So that's why, Grande, I want to get your take. I don't eliminate teams from my draft strategy.
No, you can't, because that's like saying I'm a Giants fan, so I'm not going to pick a Cowboy, or I'm not going to pick an Eagle. You can't.
Oh, I hate that, dude. There are
Fantasy,
people who do that, bro. I hate that.
There really are, but like fantasy as a whole, whether it's seasonal, DFS, whatever you're playing, there can't be bias. It has to be separate. You have to separate the bias from, yes, you may understand this team sucks, but like you said, there's a diamond in the rough somewhere on that team. So I don't separate it. I can't see how you would separate it if you are going to be an elite fantasy player.
Right. And that's where, at the end of the day, yes, it might not be a sexy team, the Dolphins, but and here's someone who I think is real, by the way, when it comes to Dolphins, Jordan Howard. Yep. And this is a guy that everybody knows. Everybody's been saying it from the FSGA drafts that all the Fantasy Alarm staff that was involved, everybody got Jordan Howard. But because it's a nice value, Grande, I was talking to Ronas about this on Alarm After Hours last night, saying, I bought Miles Sanders last year for $21. And all of a sudden, week 1, 2, 3, the first few weeks of the season, I'm like, what the hell? And I had Jordan Howard for about $5 or $6 on 1 or 2 of those teams. And Jordan Howard is the guy. And it just shows me that when he's healthy, he can still be that player. I know Matt Breida is there, but with now players opting out of Miami, that's another opportunity right there for starting running back. Get this guy in the 5th, 6th round I've seen in a good amount of drafts. I'll take that to the bank all day, Grande, if I'm aced out of my early active targets.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who's currently running back 40. Fancy, and like you said it, keyword starter. It's not like, and I am a big Matt Breida guy. I think Matt Breida has all the talent in the world. He's just, a nick here, a knack there, off the field for 2 games, off the field, middle of a game. He can't stay healthy, and that's going to give Jordan Howard 200 carries like he's had for 3 straight seasons. And, I mean, look, I'm not saying Jordan Howard is like a must-have, but I just took him in the 7th round in the DWG6, the Best Ball Andy Singleton run league, hosted on Fantrax. He's my running back 3. And I think he is a perfect running back 3. You can put him in the flex. He's going to touch the ball 15 to 20 times a game. I think that he can provide that goal line punch that they need, because I think I do think Breida plays a pretty big role in this offense staying healthy. I think he's very good in the passing game. I think he's going to catch a lot of passes, but he's a home run threat. And if Breida gets you down to the goal line after a big home run, they're going to check Howard into the game for a touchdown. I could see a scenario where we see 8 touchdowns out of Jordan Howard, 10 touchdowns. If we get 10 touchdowns for RB40, I mean, we're going to win. You're going to win a lot of leagues with Jordan Howard. And I don't see why all the other industry folk aren't jumping on the fantasy alarm bandwagon and taking Jordan Howard, who's currently our RB40. So, yeah, I think at his value, it's pretty hard to beat because you're like, let's just run down this list, right, Fancy? The guys that are being taken around Jordan Howard. Tariq Cohen, right? Tariq Cohen, great in PPR, sure, but he might catch 5 passes for 26 yards. So maybe. Kerryon Johnson, split backfield. Keyshawn Vaughn, now the most crowded backfield in probably fantasy now that LaShawn McCoy signed in Tampa. Phillip Lindsay, he just got replaced by Melvin Gordon. How can we not put Howard over all these guys? Prioritize Howard, a guy who's going to have 200-plus touches. I love that call. I think he's just too cheap in terms of ADP right now. He's real, Fancy, not fake.
Right. And when it comes to Matt Breida that you mentioned, the one frustration that you alluded to was that every week for the last 2 years, questionable. And that's what sucks about not having the probable tag, because I'm sitting there during bye weeks, and a lot of the time when Matt Breida was playing, it was in those 4 o'clock games. So I was under the gun having to make pressure decisions whether or not I'm going to be taking a loss, taking a 0, taking an L in my lineup. And it's just so frustrating. It was almost like Julian Edelman. I'm sorry, Mpemba. It was almost like Julian Edelman last year. Every single week, the guy is questionable, James. And that just drove me crazy. And I know it's a new season. We have to turn over a new leaf. But I saw it not for 1, 2 years in a row. Questionable most weeks.
So, like, I agree. And it's 100 different injuries is the problem. Like, it's not just like one, like the guy gets hurt every time. He's just so fragile. But injuries are so fickle. Like, I think he just give me a 16-game season and this guy will be 1,000-yard rusher. He'll catch 50 balls. And I'm not saying in this particular offense because there is Jordan Howard blocking him, but he could be a lead back if he were just to stay healthy because he's so good. He also just announced himself as the fastest player in the NBA or in the NFL, not the NBA. He just he is the self-proclaimed fastest player in the NFL. He just came out and said that. So, I mean, hey, I'm on board.
I almost want to say he's not real anymore, Grande. We should run.
Yeah, I think this is time to do what Jadakiss said, and these are the type of people we hate.
That's right. Now, speaking of someone that I really do not like at this point when it comes to ADP, and just I still see him go in that second round, Aaron Jones. And the reason is, and I'll say this, the NFL draft. The NFL draft really turned me off to Aaron Jones. Seeing what the Packers did, getting A.J. Dillon, Williams is still there. It just really scares me. We're talking about a guy that had 19 touchdowns. And when I've brought this up on shows before, people, because they're smart, our subscribers very smart, they say, well, Fensty, he'll be somewhat active in the passing game. And if you're going to go with the notion that they didn't do anything to help Aaron Rodgers out, no funches, maybe he gets a few more targets in the passing game. For me, though, Grande, too much uncertainty, and I don't like too much uncertainty when it comes to my second-round pick in fantasy football.
I agree, and you're not taking someone in the second round to potentially repeat. Like, you need stability in that second round, and with A.J. Dillon and Jamal Williams still there, stability is not what we have. Plus, he's on the last year of his contract, so, like, do they need, like, they could run him into the ground, kind of like what I think a lot of people are thinking what Atlanta's going to do with Todd Gurley. I think everyone thinks right. I think, like, these guys, they could just kind of throw them out there for as many and wear them down and then get rid of them. And that's kind of where A.J. Dillon comes in to take the reins. But I don't think they have many ties to Aaron Jones. Like, they don't need to. Like, he's a good pass catcher, but he has pretty bad hands. He dropped a lot of passes out of the backfield last year. He had some big games that could have been even bigger. He got benched a lot for Jamal Williams because he couldn't hang on to the ball. And Aaron Rodgers is very very weird about throwing to people who can't hold on to the ball. I mean, he's always been like, I will not throw to you if you don't hang on to the ball. It's kind of like that Tom Brady where he doesn't trust rookies at all. Like, I think Aaron Jones is okay in the second round. And I had this discussion actually with John Pemba and Sean Mitchell the other day. Like, if he's going in the third round, perfectly, I think that's great value. But like you said, it's pick 16. So in a 12-team league, he's on the turn. I mean, if you're sitting in that 8 spot, that's where he's going. I don't love it. I'm with you. I mean, the Packers still were in the top 10 in throwing last year in attempts. I still think that's going to be the case. And if they're not, they have 2 other running backs that can run the ball. So I mean, I'm with you. I think Aaron Jones is a little overrated. But this all could be moot if he goes out and scores us 15 touchdowns again, because then it's like, okay, well, we're all wrong because he got us another 15. I mean, he scored 19, so I'm not going to go 19. But if he gets us 15, then it's totally worth it.
Right. And some of you are probably wondering, as Grande said, well, in the third round, it's okay. A second round, it's not just one round. You're talking cornerstone draft picks in your first 3 rounds. So think of it like this. Let's say that you're game planning around Aaron Jones and you're uncertain. You grab a receiver in the first round, and then you go Aaron Jones as your first running back. I don't want to be in that position. If, let's say, you go running back in the first round, and then you go an elite receiver in the second round, let's say someone like a Hopkins is still there. Now you've got your awesome first-round running back, Hopkins, then you can take a risk if you want on Jones after that. And I feel like the blow wouldn't be as severe if he actually fails or really underperforms. And I feel like people don't get it. They just see it as, oh, what's the difference between a second and a third round pick? There's a massive amount of difference when it comes to the second and third round, Grande.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point when you mentioned Aaron Jones shouldn't be your primary RB1. That shouldn't be your target for RB1. I do think there's a scenario where at 16, where his ADP is, if Miles Sanders falls to me in the first round, or Joe Mixon, or if Dalvin Cook slips to me in the first round, maybe I do take Aaron Jones on the turn because that's my RB2. But if I do take a Michael Thomas in the first round or Devontae Adams, I'm not coming back with Aaron Jones knowing that he's my RB1, knowing that's who I'm relying on, knowing, now that's pit in my stomach feeling, Fancy. So I think it's an important point that you brought up. Like, RB2, fine. But RB1, he's just sharing there's 3 people in that backfield.
Right. It's not comfortable. It's not. And we shouldn't have that pit in our stomach feeling when it comes to first, second, third round picks in fantasy sports. It just shouldn't be that way. And for me, the one person that I did was when I took Mike Trout in a fantasy baseball draft. I was at 5th overall. I had that feeling because of reasons beyond fantasy sports. But beyond that, I'm not going to take that kind of risk. And with Aaron Jones, as much as I love what he did last year, as everybody else that owned him, this year is a new year, 3-headed monster when it comes to the Packers. And that's where I'm going to see if he drops. Like you said, Grande, third round, I'm sitting there. I want to go with a strong running back build to start. Okay, I'll take that risk, but I need another back in front of him that I know will get the job done and doesn't have as much competition in the backfield.
Agreed. Everything you just said, spot on.
Yep. Grande, you're a Florida guy, so I want to, and I hope you're wearing your mask, by the way, and the rest of your state needs to learn how to do that. But let's talk about Cam Akers. And I have been the flag bearer of the Cam Akers fan club since draft night. I saw what I saw. Bad offensive line, Florida State, still dominated, active in the passing game as well. And yes, kind of like Aaron Jones, there is another player. There's Henderson in the backfield. But I was told, and I told him Pemba this too, that we were told last year was going to be 50-50 split with Gurley and Henderson. Did not happen. So this year, I'm going to wait to see if it does happen. I think that the reason why you get a Cam Akers who has amazing burst, excellent agility. This is a guy that I'm still seeing go in the 4th round. And that I love that ADP. I saw Ronas get him in the super flex draft in the 8th round. Grande, I don't know if you got to see a lot of this guy, you being local, but from every piece of tape I saw and seeing the situation he's going in, I want this guy as my running back too.
So I was on your side of the fence earlier in the year, and I do agree that last year was going to be an apparent split, and it didn't happen. Obviously, Gurley dominated the ball, especially in the second half of the year. Gurley, he was everywhere. Now, I did not like McVay's comments at all when he said he didn't just say he had 2 running backs. He said he has 4 caliber starters, which kind of freaked me out. And then he doubled down and said he liked what the Niners did last year with Mostert, with Tevin Coleman, and Breida. And that scared me, to be perfectly honest. It frightened me, not completely off of Cam Akers, because I agree with you. I think he is very talented. Before the Damian Williams news, where now Clyde Edwards-Helaire is clearly the favorite, I was in the Cam Akers as the best running back ADP in the class over a guy like Helaire, who was going in the 3rd round, 2nd round, 1st round in an FSGA draft I saw. Then McVay made those comments. Then he made the statement that he liked what the Niners did. And we all know, like, it was tough outside of the end of last year to own a Niners running back consistently. Mostert was consistent towards the end of the year. Coleman was up and down all last year. Breida, we know, we've already touched on him with the injuries. So I like Akers, the player. I don't like that there's apparently 4 backs. And I agree, it could be all talk. McVay could just be chirping a little bit to get people
Why would a coach, Grande, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why would a coach isolate one of their players, especially where all we have now, us, these athletes, still being in pandemic mode, we have time to think and our gears grinding. If you're a coach of a team, why would you single out a rookie when you have other guys like that? Why would you put yourself in that position right now? And why would you put that pressure on the rookie running back? I just feel like, as Howard Bender often says, it's lip service what he says.
I see where you're coming from. I think that has a lot to do with confidence. Maybe if Akers isn't confident, that makes me even more nervous. Like, if he's not confident, that it's like, my coach isn't coming out and saying I'm the number 1 guy. Well, why? I want him to come out and say I'm the number 1 guy, because I am the number 1 guy, and I want to show that
will motivate him.
It could also be a deterrent. It could also be something he comes into camp like, it's like, screw this. Like, they got 3 other guys. Why do they need me? I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but playing devil's advocate, I think, it could be the case. I think Akers is right now, his ADP is 67, which, if you're in a 12-team league, my math, that's back end of the 5th round. That's not too bad. That's your RB2. If you're doing a Rick Wolf smart system, that's your RB3. And if you get Cam Akers as your RB3, and Glenn Colton, sorry, shout out to Glenn. That's pretty good value, especially someone that we consider to be the lead back of the 4 guys they have there. So I like Akers. I liked him more before McVay's, quote, lip service, but let's see how it plays out. I'm not going to shy away from him, but I'm also not reaching for Akers, I think, like I was in some best balls earlier. I was potentially going with him in the 4th. I was potentially going in early 5th. If he falls to me in the 6th, I'm cool with that. Maybe if he somehow falls to the 7th, it's a no-brainer, but I'm not reaching for Cam Akers, just knowing they do apparently want to implement the 49ers 3-headed, 4-headed monster approach.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. But remember, last year we were told the same thing, the same dog and pony show. And what happened? Nothing. That's what happened. So just waiting to see, and that's the attitude I'm taking. But hey, we all have different opinions. And Grande, speaking of coach talk, let's stick in the state of Florida theme here with you and I hosted here. I'm kind of a half Floridian because half my family lives in Florida. I didn't really go on vacations as a kid. We went to Florida just every single time. There's a reason Disney World is my favorite place in the world. But let's talk about Tampa, because Arians comes out and says that Ronald Jones, quote, is the main guy. I see that, and I'm like, okay. Casual fantasy players see that. They're like, I got to draft this guy. He's the guy. I got to make sure to get him now, especially before the ADP rises. I just say to that, slow down. because if he sees more out of Keyshawn Vaughn, his opinion can change on a dime. And that's where I got to ask you. Ronald Jones, according to what Arians is saying, he could be pulling our legs here, but Arians is saying he's the main guy. Is he real or is he fake?
I mean, he had 175 carries last year, which was good. And he was pretty good in stretches. I mean, they also brought in Shady McCoy, which is obviously throws a monkey wrench into everything because now they have 4 running backs because they have Dare Ogbunwale, too, who was the apparent pass catcher. He didn't play a lot last year, but he was still there. If you look at the ADP, McCoy is the 3rd highest trending back at fantasyalarm.com /NFL/ADP. 3rd highest trending running back. John messaged me like, that's the best pass catching back already. And Brady loves his pass catching backs. I mean, just look what he has done with James White. Look what he's done with Rex Burkhead. So that, I think, more than Keyshawn Vaughn scares me, I think LaShawn McCoy cutting into his time scares me. So I think the ADP kind of is too high for me right now in Ronald Jones. And that's more because of McCoy than Vaughn. I think Vaughn was second fiddle to Ronald Jones. We saw it with Preston Barber last year where Preston Barber fell behind and, you know, it was the Ronald Jones show. It just was. And Preston Barber got some work. But
dude, you're bringing back horrible flashbacks for me, man, because I thought I was being a genius by investing in the Tampa backfield last year. Both of them double tapping, essentially going Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber side by side. And it was a nightmare, right, bro. I got it wrong so many times. Which back to start. And then in my half-point PPR leagues, Peyton Barber gets bailed out because of cheap short catches, and that's right. It. Dude, I was wrong so many times. It made me not want to play a game like bingo. I had such bad luck with that.
And that's why I think it's not much different, right? We have Keyshawn Vaughn sliding into where Peyton Barber was, and now we're throwing in LaShawn McCoy, an established veteran that Tom Brady's probably going to lean on. I just think it's a situation that we don't need. And that's sad because I wanted shares of Ronald Jones. I was on the Ronald Jones side of the fence. Now I don't think we do it.
One more for you, because now you have added, and this is I can't even say this with a straight face. Other reports coming out, and again, we're just reading news and notes because we have to, and this is what Fantasy Alarm, this is what our draft guide does. It keeps you in check. You can't believe every little headline that you read. Call them popcorn headlines for a reason, because you grab your popcorn, you go to the movies, and you buy into that for 2.5 hours. But one more player, and that's the Jets running back Le'Veon Bell. I don't really believe in anything Adam Gase says or does, for that matter. And I follow Le'Veon Bell on Instagram. I see him working out every single day. And for some reason, James, I'm still not convinced that if I'm sitting there at the end of the second round, I'm going to pull the trigger on Le'Veon Bell. I did it last year. It didn't work itself out. Gase can say that he's in amazing shape. That's not going to deter me from my thoughts on that. So, Grande, where do you stand on Le'Veon Bell? Because I've been in a lot of drafts, best ball, and a few redrafts thus far. 0 shares for Lev Bell for me.
So here are the rushing attempts under Adam Gase offenses the last 3 years. 2017, head coach in Miami, he was running the offense 32nd. Then his final year in Miami, 25th. And then last year in New York, 26th. That's rushing attempts. They did improve the offensive line. That's fine. And I think they did a great job improving it. I think they got a really good player in Becton. I don't know, because we've never seen running backs thrive under Adam Gase. And I think Le'Veon Bell is a super talented player. Obviously, he's probably at the back end of his prime. I still think there could be a year or two in his prime, but I think it's being wasted in New York. I think he's okay as like an RB2, RB3, depending on how you start your drafts. I mean, there are people this year, and I've done it a bunch in best ball, starting running back. And if Le'Veon Bell's my third running back, like, I'm pretty comfortable in that situation. It kind of is the Aaron Jones scenario. It's just 2 rounds later, because we're going to get Le'Veon Bell 3rd round, early 4th round, depending on how running back heavy your drafts are going. like I'm very neutral on Le'Veon Bell. I think it's one of those situations where he falls to me, I'm okay with it. But because Adam Gase can say all he wants, he runs his offense how he runs his offense, and he doesn't turn around and give his running back the ball. Look what I mean. Kenyon Drake is literally the best example we have. He is the best. Was one of the best running backs in fantasy football when he leaves Adam Gase offense. Devontae Parker, not in Adam Gase offense anymore, breaks out. I mean, it's just and these are just two like of the obvious names that we can present to the Adam Gase is not the best fantasy coach to have a player owned under. So
fantasy or reality, he's not the best.
Reality as well. I shouldn't have just limited it to fantasy. So like again, I think it's very situational. If he falls to me early fourth, fine. If I started running back and he's there, and I don't love all the elite receivers are there or gone because that's why Le'Veon Bell fell to me, then yeah, I don't mind it. But I'm not like confident in him as my RB2. I'm not confident in Adam Gase giving him the ball enough.
No, and especially if I'm looking at it in the second or third round. Now, let's say he's there in the fourth. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I start, because value for most players, I'd say for me, about 95% of players, value supersedes all. There are just a few guys that they could drop, and I'm still not going after, but value supersedes all when it comes to fantasy football, fantasy sports for that matter. Grande, since it's you and me, we got to talk a little NBA, because I got to tell you something, man. I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated with Vegas. I'm frustrated with DraftKings Sportsbook. I was looking at odds when it came to who's going to win the NBA championship. And I'm looking at best odds. You got, of course, the Lakers, the Bucks, the Clippers, who I think will win the championship. Regarding Montrezl Harrell, everything's cool with him, and they're not missing anyone. No more Magic City strip clubs for Lou Williams. Raptors, who I love. Then I see this team. I almost said a bad word. I'm not going to say the bad word. This team, the Houston Rockets. Dude, Houston at plus 1,400. What am I missing, man? I get it. They've got an amazing guard combination. They don't have a center. Every center since the restart has been picking them apart with ease, Grande, with ease. They have PJ Tucker, Robert Covington. That's it. You get this team in a series, you solve them in one game. I don't know how people can invest their own money into the Houston Rockets. They're an embarrassment defensively.
I think it comes down to star power in the postseason, and we've seen it a lot in years past where one guy or two guys can literally thrust you into the finals. And I don't disagree that starting PJ Tucker is not ideal because, let's face it, if you're the Lakers, it's like we can go small and run Anthony Davis at the center, and then what? Or if you're the Blazers, like we saw last night, with a full arsenal of guys, including Yusuf Nurkic, who looks better than he ever has, ever. They are not going to. They're not going to be able to contain him. Milwaukee, you know what? Let's put Giannis at center if we came to the finals. There's a ton of things that can happen. I agree, though. 1,400. Let's pump the brakes. I just will always. I can never put it past stars to, especially when the postseason slows down, because it's going to slow down, and we're going to get a lot of ISO with Harden and Westbrook. And if they take games over, I mean, they could literally beat a lot of teams. If James Harden has a game like he did against Dallas for an entire series, they can beat anybody. I really believe that, because James Harden is one of the best scorers we've seen. I know saying ever is going to trigger some people. It's really going to trigger a lot of people, because I don't think James Harden gets the respect that he deserves as a scorer. But at least in this generation,
won MVP a few years ago.
Doesn't mean he gets the respect from a lot of the casual viewers and listeners of the sport and watchers of the sport. But I think they could carry them on their backs. And I do think there's obviously flaws to what they're doing, and there's been flaws in Mike D'Antoni's system since he started implementing this system when Amari Stoudemire was playing center in New York, and Phoenix had Amari Stoudemire playing center, and like they're not centers. They're when they run into centers, they have issues. So I don't think they're going to, but I also think I understand that Stars can just bring teams to Dirk Nowitzki. I mean, literally carried a Dallas team with Jason Terry, an older Jason Terry, an older Sean Marion. They were all old, but Dirk was so good that postseason. He brought them to a championship.
But you're missing the key, Grande. They had Tyson Chandler, who was the best defensive center in the league. The reason why the Miami Heat, the Heatles, or whatever you want to call them, when they had Bosh, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, the reason they didn't win that title in 2011, Tyson Chandler. That was the reason. Joel Anthony isn't going to cut the mustard, okay? They had Tyson Chandler stopping Chris Bosh, eating him alive in the post. And that's something that micro ball doesn't give you. And PJ Tucker, yes, everybody talks about, the sweet spot corner three. I want my center banging in the boards. I don't want my centers chucking up threes like PJ Tucker or Robert Covington. Grande, I just feel like for a game, yes, Harden could take over. Yes, Westbrook could take over. But you get this team in a 7-game series, you're going to be able to figure them out. And you're going to let them get theirs and just cover the post the rest of the way. And that's why I'm scared to bet on a team like the Rockets for a series.
I mean, ultimately, I agree. But just looking from the other side, I don't it's not like we haven't seen James Harden go off for an extended period of time. It's not just one game. And you can try to figure scores like this out, but it doesn't. Sometimes it just doesn't matter. When James Harden is getting to the free throw line 20 times a game, it doesn't matter what you're doing and what box and one you're running or what zone, it doesn't matter. So that's what I'm looking at. I just think that, and if Harden's having a bad game, that Westbrook guy has had a pretty good postseason history from his days in OKC. He was a freaking baller. Some of those times where he carried Durant in the postseason, the year that they made the finals. So I don't think it happens, and I still think there are two clear-cut favorites. I don't think that's a question. I think the two teams in LA are the two clear-cut best teams. But Stars can really shine in the postseason, and that's the only reason I think why Vegas is really giving them credit. Now, am I putting my money on them? No, I agree. I'm not. But I think if there was, it's not the craziest thing I've seen in Vegas.
I'll say this. Raptors plus 1,100 or Rockets plus 1,400. It's not even close to me, Grande. It's not even close. They have championship pedigree. I love the Toronto Raptors so much. Oh, you're not a Raptors guy. Why is that?
I'm not a Raptors guy. I am more of, I think that a full-strength Milwaukee team is extremely dominant, and I think they've proven that all year long. We're talking, has Milwaukee looked great this restart? No, but they've been without Eric Bledsoe. They've been without key members of their bench. They didn't even play the second half against Brooklyn, so throw that game out of the window. Who cares? Nobody really cares about that.
Everyone's like public enemy number one after that one.
Right. The Lakers. Everyone. I remember. The Lakers went in and beat Milwaukee, and they beat the Clippers. Well, both those teams already beat the Lakers this year, so let's just not throw Milwaukee to the side. You know what I'm saying? This was clearly the best team in the NBA throughout the year. They have. Some people say LeBron, some people say Giannis. I won't give either of them the MVP because who actually knows what's the vote? A lot of the players are saying LeBron. A lot of the analysts are saying Giannis. So who knows? But I just think we don't write them off. Also, Toronto they were under 500 against teams over 500 this year, or are currently, because I guess the regular season is still technically going on. This seems more like a warm-up for the postseason, if anything. But they're under 500 against teams of 500 record or better. That scares me, and I just don't think over 7 games there's a way you contain Giannis, Middleton, Bledsoe if and when Bledsoe returns to full strength. I just don't see it. We haven't seen it throughout the regular season, and yes, we saw last year in the postseason, but this looks like a different animal, this Milwaukee team, than it did last year. Giannis looks way more finals ready than he did last year. Last year he looked a little spooked, and this year it doesn't feel like that. I've been on the Milwaukee train all year as the best team in the NBA, or at least in the East, and I don't think Toronto. Ronis and I had this discussion on a live stream on opening night. If I were to pick a team that could dethrone Milwaukee, I would actually say Boston. That would actually be the team that I would personally go with. But I mean, I get the championship pedigree with Toronto. If you want to elaborate on that more, I get it. You're not beating winning teams, and that you're getting the best in the NBA in the postseason. So
can I say one thing that might justify it a little bit?
Of course.
They could barely field a full strength team throughout the entire season.
That's fair.
They had key players injured for extended amounts of time throughout the year. Different players. One player came back, Norman Powell gets hurt. And that's when you take away parts of your bench and you have an inconsistent flow, then those better teams are going to eat you up. And that's just the way it is. And it's a testament to them that they were still able to remain a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference, banged up the entire year. So that's why I give them more confidence now. I think if there's any team that could benefit the most from the stoppage because of COVID, the Raptors, so they can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely arguably the deepest team in the NBA, because you're talking about Norman Powell, OG Anunoby, they're like the 5th and 6th options. Marc Gasol, people probably forget that Marc Gasol's even on that team, honestly. And this is like the defensive player of the year from not too long ago, a guy that people widely considered the best center in the NBA when DeMarcus Cousins was averaging like 28 and 10, and Marc Gasol was still like the number 1 center in the league. So I agree in terms of like depth now that they're fully healthy. It's a scary, deep team. But also like that rotation probably shrinks in the postseason, and we'll see how it pans out. I'm not gonna give them the edge over Milwaukee. I still think Milwaukee's just too powerful and too strong.
And I agree with you on that. And one of the biggest reasons I'll say with Milwaukee, Dante DiVincenzo, he's become top 3 favorite player of mine in the NBA over the year. I think he's a hustler. That's what he is. He has every single play. He is diving. He has earned every single minute. He hasn't been the healthiest over the last couple of years. This year, though, from what we've seen off the bench, even in the restart, I like what I see very much, and I think that's a big point of difference when it comes to Milwaukee from this year to last year, having a little bit more bench depth that actually makes an impact rather than just kind of builds the bridge to the starters coming back. That's why I think ultimately Milwaukee is coming out of the East this year. I'll say this, though, if there's any team that can dethrone them, it is the Toronto Raptors. But we'll have to see, Grande. That's why we play the game. That's why we have fun. You can catch James on Twitter at @the_real_Grande_domination. Me at Fensty Sports. Grande, it's been real. Literally, man, not fake. Thank you so much for hanging with me, man.
You're the best. Holy crap. What an incorporation there.
That's what we do. That's why I get paid the big bucks, right?
Yeah.
For James, I'm Fensty. This is Fantasy Alarm Sports Talk. We always dominate, both Grande and I. Why? Because there isn't any other option. We just win.